over 100 countries, in 7 different languages, to more than 500 million viewers each week. The World Wrestling Federation, the worldwide leader in sports entertainment.
Are you ready? You think you can tell us what to do? You think you can tell us what to wear? You think that you're better? Well, you better get ready. Bow to the masters. Break it down!
Hey guys, it's Steve from Antics here. You're listening to the Good Friends Better Enemies podcast. Only on the Counted Out 7 YouTube channel. Jay, let's go!
Hello again, wrestling fans, and welcome to another edition of the Good Friends Better Enemies podcast. My name's Jay, and I'm joined as always by that very special holiday friend of mine, good old Tyrone. Tyrone, how you doing, pal?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, it sounds like you're doing better than I am. I haven't cracked anything open today. I'm just having myself a big old glass of H2O. What are you imbibing in, my friend?
I am having a delicious lagered beer right now. Figured it is my Friday. I work different hours than most people, so I thought, what the hell? Some people only drink on weekends. Well, it's my weekend. Time to indulge.
There you go. Like Bobby Heenan said at WrestleMania 8, what the hell? Use the bell. In your case, what the hell? Use the lager. Listen, I'm really excited about this week's episode. We are covering the World Wrestling Federation's offering of In Your House D-Generation X from December 7th, 1997. This took place at the Springfield Civic Center in Springfield, Massachusetts. A pretty turbulent time in the company. I really enjoyed going back and watching this event and, of course, rebooking it. I have to say that there was some aspects of it that I'd forgotten. I've seen this event a few times over the years, and I rather enjoy it. But it is a bit of a time of ferment in the company, and there's a lot of moving parts. Some, so it's sort of indicative of the new generation to the Attitude era for me. You have some of those occupational gimmicks still lingering, but we're getting into some very controversial territory. Do you have any memories of this particular era of wrestling post Screwjob?
Just mainly that it seemed every event that we got in this era, it was the Bariquas versus the DOA. Didn't matter what event it was. Could have been a pay-per-view, could have been a Raw, could have been a Sunday Night Heat. No, that wasn't a thing yet. But there was always a version of the Bariquas versus DOA. No matter what, you didn't want it, you got it every single fucking time.
Yeah, I can't wait for this particular rebooking. I've actually made that the main event, so it's going to be a real, as I like to say, humdinger on tap this week.
I mean, it kind of deserves the main event spot. They've been working the undercard the entire time. Who doesn't want to see 8-Ball versus Jose Estrada Jr. one-on-one in a Texas death match?
Well, they weren't in Texas, man. We talked about this last week. Every time you go to Texas, you have a Texas death match. What do you have when you go to Massachusetts? I guess maybe...
you have a Springfield street fight.
Okay, I was going to say maybe like a New England clam chowder on a pole match or something, but your point is well taken.
If we're going to go with the most notorious Springfield ever, a tire fire match.
Yeah, sponsored by Lard Lad Donuts. I like that. That's very good. So yeah, no, but we're going into an area now in terms of the WWF. We had just recently on Raw seen Vince cut that very famous promo about good guys versus bad guys and shades of gray. And of course we saw the Brett Screws Brett promo and interview segment on Raw as well. We also saw DX come out and really eviscerate Bret Hart after the screw job. There was a lot of follow-up to the Montreal screw job on WWF television that seemed to linger for time immemorial. And going into this event, I felt like maybe they had kind of shoehorned Ken Shamrock into the number one contender's position. I understand that he was catching a lot of fire at this point, But for me, he didn't really have that compelling a story going into this particular event. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Not particular on that, but they do this all the time. Like you fast forward, I guess 6 years after this, I think it was, and all of a sudden Bob Holly is the number one contender. Like I get there was that storyline with Lesnar breaking his neck, but who the hell's looking for Hardcore Holly as the WWF champion? You had R-Truth all of a sudden become a number one contender. You had Jinder Mahal become a number one contender and win it. So it's not a new thing where all of a sudden they're like, oh fuck, we need somebody. We don't have a top babyface necessarily right now that we can throw into this spot. Let's just try and boost somebody and see what happens.
Well, that's fair. I would take issue with the fact that, Ken Shamrock wasn't a top guy at this point. I think certainly in terms of 97, late 97 WWF roster, he was definitely one of the top guys they were pushing. So I wouldn't say he was being elevated into a world championship spot. I think he was already hovering around the top of the card at that point. As far as Bob Holly goes, I mean, I really rather enjoyed that storyline because it was a legit injury that happened to Bob Holly. So I like the idea that they capitalized on it as opposed to just, brushing it to the wayside and not following up with it whatsoever. I rather enjoyed that match. I mean, obviously we weren't going to see Bob Holly win the title or have a long run, but I like that they actually main evented a Royal Rumble with that.
I see what you're saying, and I'm fine with it from a storyline perspective. But to me, it's just, like I said before, nobody is buying Bob Holly as a number one contender. They had never done anything with him prior to that. When Lesnar broke his neck, it was Lesnar climbing to the top, going through the entire roster, and Bob Holly was just victim number 7.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I do agree with you. I think the one thing I will say about Bob Holly in his defense is that he was on the roster for a long time. So to see someone who had that kind of tenure on the WWF roster getting that opportunity, I bought into it is what I'm saying. But I completely understand your point behind it. As far as Shamrock goes, I do think that at this point he was very much in the mind's eye of the company as somebody they could elevate into that main event level. He would go back to the Intercontinental Championship program with The Rock following this event and then going on to battle for the Intercontinental title throughout the better part of the rest of his WWE tenure. I personally think that there was a little bit more, to coin a phrase from Tyler, meat on the bone in terms of Shamrock. I think that we could have seen him win a championship at one point and be the champion in the WWF. And had his run not come to an end in September of 1999, I think that might have been the point to do it. But again, I just think in terms of this particular event and this particular era post Montreal, we really had a lot of varying directions. I mean, you can talk about how we had somebody like the Sultan on the roster, but at the same time we have, the New Age Outlaws and DX. So it was kind of a turbulent time in terms of the direction of the company.
Yeah, but that could be said almost about every era. Like you look at even going back to the 80s, you have somebody like a Special Delivery Jones, who is just like the jobber to the stars. Then you have your Hulk Hogan, who's the All-American boy. But then you have your weird, I don't want to say cartoonish, but very cartoonish Moondogs, Kamala, the Bushwhackers, the Honky Tonk Man. But then you put somebody like a Greg the Hammer Valentine in there, who is just a legit stiff worker. You go into the early 90s, you've got the Repo Man, the Berserker, but then you've also got your Ric Flairs, you've got your Randy Savages, who, had the pomp and circumstance, no pun intended, but was a legit worker, not saddled with a really dumb gimmick. You had the ones who did have the dumb gimmicks that could really work too, like I don't know why the first one that comes to my mind is Jacques Rougeau with the Mountie, but that is a perfect example of it. You fast forward into the new generation, you've got your Bret Hart, who is just a normal run-of-the-mill white meat babyface, and then you've got your Jean-Pierre Lafitte, who is the pirate stealing his jacket with the stupid gimmick. You've got your Sean Waltmans, who really dumb name, but great worker. You go into the Attitude Era, and we're seeing it here with with your Steve Austin, say, who is the blue collar ultimate man's man. And then Brackus is roughly on the roster at the same time, too, which is the most ridiculous, jacked up human being. You've got the light heavyweights that they're going forward with here, where realistically there are 3 or 4 who actually make sense, and then Scott Putski is thrown in there. You could say it about any era where there is always the cartoonish part and the real part. But Jay, to quote you last week, that's wrestling.
That is indeed wrestling, very much so. And I do agree with you. I mean, you look at even a character like one of your favorites, Goldust, starting off in this era as the artist formerly known as Goldust. While it started off as being quite risque for the first, few months of that particular incarnation of the character, by the time he reverted back to the Dustin Rhodes character in the early summer of 1998, the artist formerly known as Goldust character had kind of become a parody of itself and was almost comedic itself. So to your point, it was a little bit cartoonish. And I think that maybe sometimes the argument can be made that with some of these gimmicks that we've seen throughout the years, no matter what the era, whether it's the golden age, the new generation, the attitude, ruthless aggression, or what have you, that the initial thought is maybe to try to present them in a somewhat serious manner. But due to the reaction of the audience or the direction that the character goes in, it becomes more cartoonish as time progresses, as opposed to the sort of infancy of the character, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get that. It's weird when you look at certain gimmicks like that. Like you use Goldust, it kind of went full circle. You look at, let's go a little bit more present. You look at Fandango. When he started out, his first match under that character was at WrestleMania against Chris Jericho, where he got the win. I don't know if they actually had plans to do something big with him, but very, very soon he was down to the not even upper mid card, but like the lower to mid card, then regulated into a weird tag team with Tyler Breeze that they got over because they're talented human beings. But it's just sometimes you wonder where the direction's going with a lot of these gimmicks.
No, I completely agree. And I think maybe to a certain degree, they don't really either. They kind of create these gimmicks, create these characters, and maybe have penciled in where they'd like to see it go. But you can never predict how the audience is going to react. I mean, there's also been a lot of gimmicks that have come through the course of time that perhaps were meant to be something that they weren't, or they had higher hopes for that end up not catching on, or vice versa, something that they kind of threw on somebody. Well, I mean, look at the New Age Outlaws, for example. They're on this card, so I think that's a great example of it. Is they didn't really just have much to do for these two guys. They didn't have a lot for them. You had the Road Dogg Jesse James as the real Double J, and then of course you had Billy Gunn as Rockabilly. So there wasn't a lot going on with those two guys. Hey, let's throw them in a tag team, and then fast forward, you have arguably the most over tag team of the Attitude Era in the New Age Outlaws. So, I mean, sometimes you catch lightning in a bottle. And so I think there's an argument to be made both ways. But anyways, the point is for me is I think it's a really interesting time in the company. And to your point, I definitely agree with a lot of what you say. I think that we do go through periods where a lot of the rosters that we've seen throughout the years, in fact, probably all the rosters throughout the years have had some semblance of cartoonish nature to them because, as you said, that's wrestling.
Even you look currently and you look at, I guess, not present day, but about a year ago, The Fiend. That is a total cartoonish character, but Bray Wyatt made it work. So it's also all in the performer themselves. You look at The Undertaker, you put that on the wrong guy, that gimmick would have been dead in the water within the first year, 100%. He made a career for 30 plus years doing that.
Yeah, I would say The Undertaker is probably the shining example of that exact conversation that we're having right now. He is kind of the light at the end of the tunnel, or the person that you can point to in terms of being the one man who made the most out of a character who, again, on its face was sort of ridiculous. I don't think in the beginning the idea was that he would actually be a dead man, but as time grew, he started to have superpowers and the creatures of the night and all this kind of stuff. And if he wasn't committed to the character in the same way that he was, that character would have died a horrible death long ago. So with that being said, I mean, I think we're basically at the point where we can kind of talk about this pay-per-view. I mean, as we've mentioned earlier on in the program a few moments ago, this was the first pay-per-view post Montreal Screwjob. If anybody wants to hear about the Montreal Screwjob that hasn't, which would be a shock to me if you're listening to this podcast, you can go back to listen to our first episode of season 2, which is the rebooking of Survivor Series 1997. Of course, if you're not familiar with that particular angle or what happened on that evening or the events leading up to it, then perhaps you should stop, watch the pay-per-view, or Google what's surrounding it. There is more than enough information about that particular scenario and what took place on that fateful evening in Montreal. But we are going to cover the follow-up effort by the World Wrestling Federation at the D-Generation X pay-per-view. Now, it was branded D-Generation X because obviously these individuals, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and Chyna, were the new hot act in town. They were rivaling Steve Austin in terms of popularity at this point for different reasons. And so we've decided to brand the pay-per-view D-Generation X. Tyrone, do you want to open us up with the first match that happened in canon, my friend?
Oh, why the hell not? It is an opening contest scheduled for one fall to crown the inaugural light heavyweight champion. Now, we had a tournament for this that featured such names as Aguila, who is S.A. Rios, Super Loco, who is Super Crazy, Scott Taylor, a.k.a. Scotty Too Hottie, Brian Christopher, a.k.a. Grandmaster Sexay, Taka Michinoku, Devin Storm, and a couples that I don't even really know who they are, so we're not even going to talk about them. But the finals bring us to Taka Michinoku and Brian Christopher, a.k.a. Jerry Lawler's kid, a.k.a. Grandmaster Sexay, a.k.a. I'm sure there's more. What do you got for me, brother?
Well, you know what? I've actually decided to keep this. As we talked about in the last couple of weeks, there's always going to be events where we keep certain matches and certain things. Just because we rebook the events doesn't mean we have to change absolutely everything. And I do feel like this was a great way to start the show. I do feel like this was the match to kind of conclude this tournament. So I've kept it the same with Taka Michinoku going over, and I think it made sense for him to be the first light heavyweight champion. And then, of course, we're going to go into 1998 with him having various challengers. So I just felt like for the purposes of this particular event, why not keep this one the same? What do you think?
I think that was a very smart choice. I don't know what else you would have done, to be perfectly honest with you, because you needed the light heavyweight title. You needed all of that. So why the hell not keep it? It makes total sense.
Yes, indeed. I wholeheartedly agree with that. So thank you for your approval. I wasn't sure if you're going to yell at me for keeping something or if we were going to maybe have an easier week there, easier time this week.
No, dude, we're totally in agreement on that. I love it because it keeps the light heavyweight title in the process still.
Okie dokie, Smokey. Well, this is where the rubber meets the road, as they like to say, to coin a phrase. What's the next match on the card, pal?
Well, the next match on the card is what we all came here to see, and that is Los Boricuas of Jesus Castillo Jr., Jose Estrada Jr., and Miguel Perez Jr., defeating the DOA of 8 Ball, Chains, and Skull. So not only are you getting a 6-man tag between these two wonderful factions, but you're not even getting Savio Vega and Crush in it.
The next match on the card is the artist formerly known as Goldust, accompanied by Luna, taking on Marvelous Mark Merrow, accompanied by Sable, in a tuxedo match.
I don't even know what the fuck to say to that. A tuxedo match, like in '97. I get it because you have Goldust in it, but this is still really, really stupid sounding to me. But yeah, tell me about it.
Well, this is a continuation of the feud that started when Goldust made some advances towards Sable. The returning Luna allowed Goldust to win at Survivor Series. And of course, Merrill wanted another crack at the Golden One, but Dustin refuses. The following week on Raw, Dustin counters the challenge with a tuxedo match. Very suggestively so. Merrill, who is obviously disgusted, begrudgingly agrees to the match. At the pay-per-view, Mero is dressed conservatively, a classic tux. Goldust is wearing a powdered blue jacket and top hat, toxic waist green tuxedo shirt, a bolo tie, and a garter belt with silk stockings and powder blue trunks. The match is hard-hitting, with Dustin breaking the momentum with frequent trips to the outside. The finish comes as Sable, who is encouraging Mero as he's caught in a sleeper hold. Sorry, I lost my train of thought here. Gets a huge pop from the crowd as she jumps up on the apron. Luna then pulls Sable off of the apron and attacks her. The women's brawl stops the action in the ring. Both Goldust and Mero smile at each other. Goldust is proud of her woman, and Mero is quite frankly glad to see the person who is showing him up weekly and getting a pop get what he feels she has coming to her in his warped sense of thought and frame of mind. The fight's broken up by WWF officials. Mero concedes the match. As Sable is helped backstage by officials, Mero follows, clearly taking a large measure of enjoyment in Sable's misery. After they've returned to the backstage area, you see we cut back to the ring where Goldust is now in the ring trying to strip and beginning to strip for the audience. But Luna stops him by strapping his hide with a strap presumably used for a Caribbean strap match. She wraps the strap around his neck and leads him backstage. Clearly, these two are into some very alternative recreation.
I, what? No, what? You really went into a lot of detail for this one, man, and you lost me. This is too weird even for me.
Well, it's just the way the segment plays out in my head. I mean, we've already had Mero be so aggressive about the fact that he can't stand that Sable's getting these pops and constantly interrupting her promos, saying that, asking her if he gave her permission to do so. Goldust is just completely out there right now. So I just took some creative license. I thought, you know what? This is Goldust's MO. Shock value, trying to get the rise out of the crowd, being as different as possible. So dressing like a lunatic. And then, at this point, I feel like there was so much convolution in the booking to begin with. Then, why not just have some fun with this and see where it ends? And I kind of feel like this, in a way, blows off the Mero Goldust thing in a sense. And now we go off into different directions, and we've established the provocative nature of the Goldust character even more so now. And of course, we've continued this heat between Mero and Sable. So I feel like it does kind of serve its purpose.
So sorry, it was so convoluted for me there. Was there a winner, or did the match just kind of stop?
The match just kind of stopped when they had the brawl between the women, and that's when Mero and Goldust kind of, you can see it through their facial expressions that they're both kind of happy about the situation at ringside for different reasons. And then Mero just kind of leaves. He takes a powder when Sable's being helped to the back, and he's just, pleased as punch that Sable's kind of got her comeuppings from Luna. And that's when Goldust decides, it's kind of that thing that we saw in the Attitude Era where, if there was some sort of a bra and panties match or something and someone didn't strip, then eventually someone would. So that's what Goldust is doing here. He's thinking in his mind that, well, I'm going to give the crowd what they came here to see, and that's me get naked. So he starts to strip, and that's when Luna grabs him and straps him in the ass, grabs the strap around his neck, and leads him back to the backstage area. So I don't know. I just thought it was fun. I wasn't sure what you'd feel about it, but I thought it was kind of a fun little segment and very indicative of the era that we're in.
I really miss Jose and Miguel and Skull and 8-Ball after listening to all of that. That honestly may be the dumbest thing you've ever booked. Hands down. I don't it might be dumber than anything I've ever booked. And I've booked some fucked up shit. That was that put you on a new level, man. That put you on a whole new level. I love Goldust. I love Mark Mero. Love Luna. Fine with Sable. Love weird stipulations and weird gimmicks and everything, but yeah, this one's just too out there for me, dude.
Fair enough. I mean, it was part and parcel to the artist formerly known as Goldust. You know, when you see the guy being led to the ring by a chain with a ball gag in his mouth, I think all bets are off. So I understand what you're saying, but I thought it was a fun way to book it. And by all means, if it's not your cup of tea, listen, this is not my cup of tea either. It's not something that I particularly enjoy watching, but I just thought it fit with both characters to kind of do it this way. And that, again, with that way we can blow off this particular feud and go on to different things in 98.
That's fair. I mean, I can think on one hand how many tuxedo matches I've liked, and I believe it's just Jim Duggan and Ted DiBiase from Mid-South. But yeah, it's one of those stipulations. It's like what you said, a bra and panties match. They're dumb. They're not good. They're just there to get a cheap pop, see some skin, move on to the next one. It was just the time. I get it, but I think it's time to move on to the next match, unless you got anything else you want to go into detail with on this.
No, that's 100% fine. Agree to disagree. I gave it a shot, and much like creative, sometimes you hit a strike and sometimes you hit a gutter ball. So we will let our listening audience decide what they like. Hey, hit us up on social and let us know what you think. I know there's some of you out there that really enjoy this era, and I know that probably Tyler's going to be listening to this as well. Tyler, let us know on social what you think. Did you enjoy this booking of this match? Do you think it's stupid? Does it make sense to you, or am I completely out to lunch? Let us know, folks. I mean, don't ever hesitate to comment to us. We love hearing your feedback. So let us know what you think about the tuxedo match here on D-Generation X in your house. What's the next match on the card, my friend?
Well, the next match was a tough man match originally between Butterbean and Mark Marrow. Clearly, we're not getting that because we've already had Mark Marrow on the show. So do we get Butterbean still, or are we completely switching it up?
The next match on the card is another match that actually is going to basically stay the same, and that's the WWF Tag Team Championship match, the New Age Outlaws defending the championships against the Legion of Doom. So if you recall, at our Survivor Series rebooking, we actually had the LOD drop the titles to the New Age Outlaws at that pay-per-view as opposed to Raw 2 weeks later. So we are going to do the obligatory rematch here. It's the same finish, basically. Henry Godwin interferes, hitting Animal with a bucket. Hawk gets disqualified for using the buckets on the Outlaws. The Godwins feud must come to an end, and LOD is infuriated. So I understand that I'm kind of going back to the well here with the Godwins. I could have changed this, but I thought to myself that we had been kind of flirting with this idea throughout the better part of the latter half of 97 that the LOD and the Godwins was a blood feud, specifically because an episode of Shotgun Saturday Night that was taped for syndicated television, LOD had faced the Godwins in the spring of 97, and in the course of hitting a doomsday device, Henry Godwin fell wrong and broke his neck legitimately. Now, he was off TV for several months because of this. And so when they returned, there was a feud that ensued between the two teams. We never really got a definitive blow-off for that particular feud. So I thought to myself, well, I know that it's kind of a little long in the tooth at this point coming into 98. I feel like we do have one more stip match. All four guys were real big hosses that were rough and, you know, kind of brawling, brooding individuals. So I feel like at this point, let's give them that blow off. I don't know what it's going to be in the future, but let's do that one definitive blow off after this particular pay-per-view.
Well, I hope you're booking that one because I sure as hell do not even want to see that. And if you're setting me up for it, I'll tell you that blow off is going to happen on an episode of Metal or Shotgun Saturday Nights.
You know, their matches actually weren't that bad. All four guys could work, and they were, again, hard-hitting matches.
Dude, I'm not denying that they can work. It's just in 1997, 1998, I was completely over the Legion of Doom by this point. The Godwins were fucking Confederate flag wearing Southern pig farmers who I had no patience for that gimmick. So by this point, I'm just over all of it.
That's completely fair. I completely understand that. And again, for me, it was just, I felt like the finish kind of made sense in terms of getting the Outlaws a win here. And then now that the direction has shifted for the tag team champions, they don't necessarily have to face the Legion of Doom again. We can go on to different scenarios and different challengers into
Los Boricuas. Los Boricuas.
I like it. So that's pretty much where we stand on the tag team match, man.
All right, I'm totally cool with that. I mean, the next match on the card was supposed to be the New Age Outlaws defeating the LOD by disqualification for the tag team championship. So we've essentially gotten rid of a match. I don't know if you're going to add anything in its place, but what do we have coming up next?
Well, there's all the great WWF superstars, and then there's me, Double J. Well, he's not Double J this time. He is Jeff Jarrett, and he's going one-on-one with the man they call Vader.
Really? You took off the Jarrett Undertaker match that everybody was clamoring for, right?
I did. I felt like, for me, after what happened at the Bad Blood pay-per-view, we didn't see the Undertaker during Survivor Series, and this was actually supposed to be the Undertaker's first appearance back since the Bad Blood pay-per-view. So I thought, you know what? Let's leave him off for a little longer. We don't need to see him that quick.
I'm not mad at this at all. I like that you put Vader on the card. I think that Jarrett and Vader would actually have a good... I think Jarrett's terribly underrated. I think he gets... And let me say why I say he's underrated before you tell me he's not underrated. I think so many people think of him as the TNA guy and always putting himself on top, booking himself as the king of the mountain, winning the championship all the time. In WCW, he seemed to be in like Russo's pocket, always getting over with him. But he's a strong worker. You look at his WWF runs, yeah, he's a multiple-time Intercontinental and Tag Team Champion, but I truly think Jarrett could have been a guy who could have had a run with the strap, and actually a decent run. When you need a heel champion for the babyface to go on the chase, I think Jarrett could have been that guy.
I don't disagree with you at all. I think Jarrett is underrated as well. Now, to your point, I mean, when he was running TNA, he's not doing anything dissimilar than what, Vern Gagne did in the AWA, or,
Nash did it in WCW. Hogan's done it everywhere he's ever gone. Like, it's just when you have the creative control and you have the booking power, you're gonna put you or your buddies on top. It's just you're gonna do.
That's actually not where I was going with that, and I still disagree that Nash was the one that put himself in that position. But my point is that if you look at somebody who owned a territory like an Eddie Graham or like a Vern Gagne, a lot of times you put yourself as champion because you can rely on yourself. You can rely on your family. If you have people that are in and out sometimes, you have to make sure that whomever you have as the champion is someone that's going to be there weekly. So I understand Jarrett's booking philosophy to a degree in TNA, and I understand the reasons why he made himself a more prominent figure, and it wouldn't last for the entirety of the TNA run either. I mean, he would step back eventually as well and give other people that particular spot. But in the infancy of TNA, it made all the sense in the world that he'd be the guy on top. That I have no problem with that. To your point about him being an underrated talent, I 100% agree. I definitely think that had he been utilized and capitalized on more during the Attitude Era, he never would have been jumping over to WCW in 1999. So if you remember, Jarrett returned in October of 1997 and kind of cut this shoot promo on Raw to kind of bring himself back into the fold. So Jeff Jarrett had been doing a lot of this throughout the weeks leading up to this pay-per-view and had been dodging competition since returning to the WWF. So as Jarrett ran down his resume once again on the Go Home Raw for DX, he was interrupted by Vader. The Colorado Rocky Monster then goes on to say that he has been at the top of the mountain down south and has defeated his former, quote, riding partners. That's a shot at the Horseman and Flair. Vader challenges Jarrett to a match at the pay-per-view, and Jarrett accepts. The match is a lot of Vader hitting power spots and clubbing blows. Jarrett gets the upper hand by removing Vader's mask and raking the eyes. As Vader attempts to collect himself and put the mask back on, Jarrett nails a drop kick and a few right hands. Vader responds with a clothesline, sending Jeff into the corner. Vader then hits the big splash and goes for the Vader bomb. As Vader's pumping up to deliver the Vader bomb, Jarrett is able to roll out of the way towards the ring post and quickly recovers. He then rolls up Vader with his feet on the second rope for the pin. Your winner, Jeff Jarrett.
Yeah, I think this makes sense to give Jarrett the win. By this point, at the end of 97, Vader was kind of an afterthought in the Federation. I hate to say it, but he just was. And I know that with our booking, we have tried to right some wrongs with him, make him still a main event player, but he is the perfect person for Jarrett to go over. He's a monster. Jarrett's still winning by doing dastardly tricks and putting his feet on the ropes, so it's fine. I like it. I think Jarrett should have won. This is the first thing you've gotten fucking right pretty much on this show, other than the opening card, and I'm totally cool with it.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, no, I do agree with you that we've tried to go back and touch on Vader a little bit more, but truthfully, we haven't touched on 97. We really haven't touched on 96 and very little of 98. So I think in the coming weeks and months and years even of the podcast, I think we are going to try to change the trajectory of Vader's run here a little bit. And I definitely don't think that with all the pomp and circumstance that was given to Jarrett rejoining the WWF, defecting from WCW, that Vader doing the job here for Vader, or rather for Jeff Jarrett, would have made a lick of difference. I think it wouldn't have broken Vader's momentum whatsoever. So for those reasons, I thought it was completely fine to have Vader take the L on this one.
Now, does he cut a promo afterwards with Jim Ross and call himself a big fat piece of shit like he did in 98, or are we not there yet?
No, we're not at Over the Edge 1998 as of yet. We're not in Milwaukee. We're in Springfield, Massachusetts. So we'll see what happens in May of 98.
Sounds good, Buckaroo. Well, next up, we have a match that I am very, very curious to see if this is staying or not. And that is the boot camp match with Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, with his bodyguard, China, going one-on-one with the chin-leading gentleman himself, Sergeant Slaughter.
I was kind of hoping that you'd pronounce China like Donald Trump does. China.
With his bodyguard, China.
Did you ever see the 40-Year-Old Virgin? The movie?
I mean, yeah, I'm 35 years old. Of course, I've seen it at some point.
Oh my God. I just remember when he's doing the speed dating, Steve Carell's doing the speed dating, and he's like, "Oh, hi, Gina." No, it's pronounced Gina. That's so funny. Anyway,
and
the next
fun little fact: it was Kimberly Page in the speed dating with him.
She was in that, and she exposed her one of her memories to Steve Carell.
We got full nipple is what we got.
We sure did, and it was apparently chilly in that conference room. So the next match on the card is for the World Wrestling Federation Intercontinental Championship. We have another match that's actually going to stay the same, and the last one that's going to stay the same for the next few matches, which is Stone Cold Steve Austin going up against The Rock, Rocky Maivia. Now, this match is famous for a lot of reasons. If you recall, Tyrone, this was the match where Steve Austin drove to the ring in a pickup truck. We saw the NOD take backdrops onto the truck. We saw D'Lo Brown be the recipient of a Stone Cold Stunner on the top of the truck. This match had super heat. It was a lot of fun. It was a car crash, no pun intended. I didn't have the heart to change this. It's the first meeting of The Rock and Steve Austin on pay-per-view. I just don't think that it was going to get much better than this. So I really think that this match needed to stay. And if you haven't seen this match, go back and watch it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, no problems with me here. I mean, it's exactly what it had to be. It was like a 5-minute match, driving to the truck, taking out the nation, beating The Rock. Oh, hell yeah. That's it. That's what the crowd wanted then. They wanted Austin to come out, kick some ass, chug a Steve Weiser, flip the bird to a few people, stunner. That's it. That is what they got. Nobody left unhappy because of that one.
100%. I agree. So there's no sense in, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I feel like this made all the sense to keep this. It was one of the highlights of the show. Obviously, Austin was catching fire at this point. So why change it?
Yeah. I mean, it's the first one, like you said, of them on pay-per-view. And to me, it's almost one of the better ones just because it was so to the point. I do believe Austin was still kind of fighting an injury at this point. That's why it was kept so short from his neck injury with Owen, because he wasn't really working longer matches at this point. But knowing the feud that these two would go on and have, this is up there for one of their better matches. I fully and completely agree with that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with everything you just said. And I think that this was at a point as well where there was a lot of potential in both men still. We weren't at the point where we had a WrestleMania 17 or even a WrestleMania 15. This to me was sort of foreshadowing what we would see in years to come. And we didn't really know what we were going to get out of these two. I mean, obviously Austin was on a trajectory and The Rock was gaining some momentum, but we didn't know where we would be, say in 3-4 years time, or even 2 years time. So I think that this is one of the unsung heroes of their feud for sure.
Well, and that's the crazy thing when you look at it. Like, this is the end of '97. So you fast forward a year and a half, and they're main eventing their first WrestleMania. Then 2 years later, another one. Then 2 years later, another one. So we're, 6 years into it? But after that one, Austin retired due to injury. Rock put over Goldberg the next month and then pretty much fucked off to Hollywood, except for Mania 20. We really didn't see him again for almost 10 years. So when you think of the amount of history that these two guys have in a 5-year span, it's ridiculous.
100%. And I don't think it's even arguable that it was the type of history that changed the course of the industry. So it's amazing to think that these two guys on their backs, obviously with the assistance of a roster that I would argue there's never been a more from top to bottom of the card over roster than the WWF Attitude Era roster. For these two guys to be headlining that.
That's your opinion. I would almost say the Ruthless Aggression Era was almost more stacked. I think it was more stacked, if not on par, than the Attitude Era, because you had all the WCW talent in there, you had the ECW talent in there. You didn't really have Rock and Austin anymore because they were done, but you still had Randy Orton, John Cena, Ric Flair, Triple H, like Kurt Angle, like all these guys were still kicking around. So I think that you and I could have a real debate on which generation had the more stacked roster.
Well, what I'm saying to you, though, is I'm just talking about being over. And I think that the difference for me is, in terms of what you're suggesting, is that in 1998, 1999, the business was so on fire. It was indicative of the rock and wrestling connection from the 80s. It was on a mainstream popular culture level where people were recognizing superstars that never watched wrestling. Every wrestler, I would say 95% of the wrestlers on the roster were over. Whereas in 2003, 2004, yes, wrestling was still popular, but it wasn't still at the same height that it would have been in 98, 99, 2000. So while there might have been more stars and more, there might have been more even better workers on the card in 2003, I don't think that necessarily the undercard was nearly as over as the undercard was during the height of the Monday Night Wars.
Think about how incredible a matchup between Los Boricuas and Los Guerreros would have been.
Yeah, that is true. I don't know what the stip would be on that, but yeah, I think that maybe you might be onto something there.
Knowing pro wrestling, it would be something highly inappropriate that we're not going to delve into right now. But I do have one question for you. Talking about Rock and Austin, out of their 3 WrestleManias, 15, 17, 19, which one are you putting on as the best?
19.
I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. I feel like we are in the minority. I think everybody says 17, and 17 was great. but I say 19 first, then 17, then 15.
Yeah, I think 19 for me because it was just a pure wrestling match. I mean, 15, you got a lot of interference, and you had Vince, of course, there. You had Mick Foley as Mankind come out. 17, you had the heel turn for Austin. I feel like for a pure one-on-one match between two guys that just wanted to settle their rivalry, and of course, we didn't know it at the time, but it was Steve Austin's last time saddling up and riding, for the lack of a better expression. To me, it feels like that was the defining match of their feud. Obviously, all the stuff that happened before it, kind of preceding it, built it to be the match that it was. But I'm always just a fan of two guys that have that storied rivalry going into the ring and leaving it all in the ring. I don't need a lot of gimmicks. I'm glad that there wasn't a lot of, weapons and things of that nature. This match by itself was, to me, the perfect climax to their feud, and in many ways the best worked match of their feud, I think, as well.
100%. And I got to say, too, when it comes to The Rock, I think Hollywood Rock is one of the best Rocks ever. The fact that he was just playing such a cocky, smarmy, bitch-ass motherfucker, I loved it. I think that was the best gimmick that he ever had, or best version of him that ever existed.
Yes, I do agree. And he had some kick-ass entrance music as well for that run, too. So I do agree with you.
It was the best version of his music ever. Like, it's just so perfect for him and his cocky walk coming out and keeping everyone waiting. Clearly, you can tell I just watched the Ruthless Aggression era television show about the episode because I'm gushing about it. But my God, it was good.
Yeah, it was really good. And even just the cadence of his walk and how it was matching the music and everything. So no, it was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. But with that being said, we do have some more on the card to get to. So what's the next match that you have scheduled on our pay-per-view here?
Well, it's clearly not happening because it's Jeff Jarrett going one-on-one with The Undertaker.
All right. Well, I've changed this up, and what we have in its stead is Kane going up against Ahmed Johnson.
I don't even want to hear about this in the slightest, so I'm literally just going to turn my brain off while you tell everybody what happens.
Okie dokie. Sounds good. So in canon, on WWF television, the week before Survivor Series, the Go Home Raw, Kane had attacked Ahmed Johnson. And so I felt like this put Johnson on the shelf for out of action for several weeks. After Kane had defeated Mankind in Montreal, it was announced that Kane's next challenger would be Ahmed Johnson, who would be returning from injury. He wasn't going to be Kane's victim and swore revenge. So Ahmed would make his return at the Go Home Raw for the pay-per-view and attack Kane, hitting him with a Pearl River plunge. As Ahmed leaves the ring, seemingly sending a message to both Kane and Paul Bearer, Kane sits up. At the pay-per-view, Ahmed gives Kane all he's got. It's like rope-a-dope. Eventually, Ahmed exhausts himself. Kane has absorbed all the offense. Suddenly, the house lights go down dark, and we hear the Undertaker's theme song. After about 45 seconds, the lights come back up. No Undertaker. In this time, Ahmed's collected himself enough to spin Kane around and hit the Pearl River plunge. Bearer is on the apron and throws his shoe at Ahmed Johnson to get his attention. Johnson goes to nail Paul Bearer as Kane sits up and is poised to nail the chokeslam and tombstone for the pin. Your winner, Kane.
Do you really think that people would want to spend their money either on a ticket or a pay-per-view to watch this? Because I sure as fuck don't. I mean, it's Ahmed Johnson at the end of 97. By this point, to quote you, what is it? The bloom was off the rose, or the rose was off the bloom, whatever that saying is you like to say. It's Ahmed Johnson at the end of 97. Sure, he was still somewhat over, but what are we doing here, Jay? Like, honestly, this is atrocious. This is genuinely atrocious. I do not like this in the slightest.
That's 100% fine if you don't like it. Ahmed Johnson, to your point, was a name. If you look at, just over a year previous, he was arguably the third or fourth guy in the company in summer of 96.
I know he was a name, but he was a name that by this point even he couldn't pronounce without sounding like a mouthful of fucking marbles.
But it's not about the promo, Tyrone. It's about the match. And the fact that Kane attacked him and put him on the shelf, he was a viable
Oh
challenger for
no,
Kane.
it's about the match with one of the world's worst overrated workers ever in Ahmed Johnson. He's gonna go out and hurt everybody. It's a good thing that Kane put him on the shelf. He should have kept him on the fucking shelf.
I don't disagree with you, but I think for the purposes of getting Kane to go through viable people who had name identity and name recognition, it makes a lot of sense for Ahmed Johnson to come back and get put on his ass by Kane. It's another name that Kane's gone through. Now he's gone through Mick Foley. He's gone through Kane. He's going to be going into bigger and better things in 1998. And we've foreshadowed the Undertaker rivalry here. So I think that it served its purpose. And it also gets Kane some more credibility going through a really tough, larger than life athlete like Ahmed Johnson was.
I don't think that by this point most people are looking at him like that. That would be like if you had a monster in today's era and you're gonna put him up against fucking, I don't know, man, like R-Truth, who at some point was a serious contender and now he's a joke, or you put him up against I'm so out of date with today's product, but I can't think of a proper reference. But there are so many other names that you could have had him go up against instead of Ahmed Johnson.
Name me some.
Anybody in the nation. Farouk would have been a perfect one because it's not going to hurt Farouk to lose because it's probably going to get there's probably going to be a schmoz finish of some sort, but it's not going to hurt Farouk to lose to Kane. I know it's not going to hurt Ahmed Johnson because nothing's going to hurt Ahmed Johnson at this point. I think we need a rule, Jay. Unless we're booking 95 or 96, Ahmed Johnson does not exist in this world.
We haven't even booked 1997 yet, so you can't say that Ahmed Johnson at this point wasn't doing anything because we don't know what Ahmed Johnson's done yet. We haven't booked 97. So
yeah, you're right. And when we do book 97 and it's my turn, guess who's going to be nowhere on the show? I don't care if you book him as a champion. He is not going to be on the show.
100% fine with me, man. But I just think that we see differently on this. We don't see eye to eye. That's completely fine. I don't think it's nearly as bad as you think it is. And again, it's not going to be a long match. It's just going to be a lot of power spots. Ahmed, throwing as much offense as he can at the Kane. Kane absorbs it all. And then Ahmed's exhausted. That's not going to take more than 5 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes. And then Kane's going to destroy him at the end with the tombstone and the chokeslam. So I don't know. I don't see what your problem is with it so much, but we agree to disagree.
All right, well, let's continue this roller coaster of garbage and see what Jay has decided to book next. We were supposed to have the IC title match here with Austin and Rock, but we already got that. That was a highlight on the card. So next up, I'm assuming we're getting, I don't know, Brackus going up against fucking Too Cold Scorpio in the main event. The way things are going right now, who knows?
After Montreal, all of DX's antics continue with the burial of Bret Hart. 2 weeks after the screw job, that familiar guitar riff hits and the crowd pops thinking it's the Hitman. Jim Neidhart would interrupt the group and their childish promo. He challenges HBK. The match is signed for Raw, Shawn Michaels versus Jim the Anvil Neidhart. The match is well worked. Just as it seems the Sharks are circling around the ring, Owen Hart appears and stands side by the Anvil, holding the higher ground in the ring. Owen grabs the mic, cuts a scathing promo on DX, and challenges the duo to a tag team match. Shawn and Hunter both agree sarcastically as we go off the air. WWF officials agree to the match, but want no part of the liability and deem it a non-sanctioned tag war. At the pay-per-view, we have a non-sanctioned tag war, D-Generation X versus Owen Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart.
All right, and how does the new foundation do in this one? Do they win, or are they just another victim to DX and their shenanigans?
This match starts off with teams in the corners, but quickly decays into a full-out brawl. Owen pairs with Hunter to start the match. Shawn nails Owen with a kick as he hits the ropes, and that's enough for Anvil to lose it. Chyna is mysteriously absent at this point. Neidhart beelines it to Michael's corner and violently pulls HBK off the apron. The two exchange fists at ringside. Owen hits Helmsley with a vicious chop block and then locks in the sharpshooter. Michaels whips Anvil into the steel steps and then saves Hunter. As HBK checks on Triple H, Owen finally gets his hands on Shawn. The two battle outside and into the crowd. Hunter and Anvil exchange bombs in the ring, with Neidhart getting the best of Triple H. The finish comes as Owen and Shawn brawl into the crowd. Chyna appears with the Outlaws. All three run in and attack Neidhart, who has the upper hand on Helmsley. They quadruple team the Anvil. Chyna with the low blow. Road Dogg nails Anvil with a chair shot to the head. And Hunter hits the pedigree, and Billy Gunn lands the Alabama Jam. The group of degenerates then throw a lifeless Neidhart to the outside and powerbomb him through the announce desk. Owen runs back to the ring and ringside with a chair in hand to make the save, leaving Shawn in the crowd. The group takes a hike when Owen emerges and assembles at the entranceway. Instead of giving chase, Owen tries to aid the Anvil. It's too late. The damage is done. We go off the air with the Outlaws, Chyna, Helmsley, and a brutalized but supremely arrogant Michaels all hitting crops chops at the entranceway, while a seething Owen Hart stares at DX with medical officials looking over Anvil at his feet. The match is a no contest.
And that was your main event, correct?
Yes.
So here's my one question. Wasn't Neidhart gone by now? Didn't he walk out right after the screw job and sign with WCW?
No, he had actually been on the Go Home Raw for this pay-per-view. So I felt like just have him come out and just extend his contract to do this match, and then he can go. So obviously they destroy him. They already destroyed him on Raw in terms of, they beat him up on Raw and then painted WCW on his back. But I felt like this was a really good way to bring Owen back and to try to avenge, the Hitman, the whatever's left of the Hart Foundation. And I feel like, especially because of what WWF had done on their television, they wouldn't kind of move on from the screw job. It went on for week after week after week. They were doing the Brett Screwed Brett promo. They did, Shawn bringing out the midget that looked like Brett, or the little person, that looked like Brett. So I just felt like if they weren't going to let it go and they're going to shoehorn Ken Shamrock into the spot, why not have DX unified as a tag team and go up against what remains of the Hart Foundation, and then you kind of blow that off, and then you can go on to whatever you want to do with Owen in the future.
I get 100% what you're doing here, and I don't hate it, but I don't like it. It's okay. I like that you found a good way to bring Owen back. I do enjoy that. I don't care about the Anvil in a main event of a pay-per-view. I know he main evented fucking Canadian Stampede only a couple of months prior to this and could still go. But at this point, I think I like the Shamrock main event better only because it's fresh. It's something we hadn't seen really. Whereas we're seeing the Hearts and DX again and again and again. And I know it's going to keep going with Owen and Hunter and Owen and Shawn. It's going to be a never ending cycle for a while. But it's fine. I'm a little bummed that you didn't keep the boot camp match. I was kind of hoping that was going to stay on there, but it's your booking. You booked a show, Jay. That's what you did.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying about the Shamrock thing, but again, if it had been a thing, and I know that it's rebooking, so we can do whatever we want, but we try to keep it in some semblance of reality. And in my mind, if it had been a thing that they kind of addressed what happened in Montreal, the next night in Ottawa, fine. That's great. You address it and then you move on. But they kept going back to it for weeks and weeks. And I felt like at that point, Shamrock as the challenger was kind of lost in the shuffle. So I'm not saying that we can't have a Shamrock match down the road, but I just felt like because they kept going back to it and it was such a focal point of the programming post Screwjob that we kind of needed a blow off. It was almost like you're teasing something that's not going to happen. You're teasing, the fact that you've buried Bret Hart, but Bret's not there to defend himself. He's gone to WCW. You do have two other people from the Hart Foundation that are able to come back and try to pick up the pieces. And I thought this was a much better way to capitalize on the Anvil rather than just have him destroyed on Raw. And then, so you have the whole angle took place in canon. You had Slaughter and Shamrock come out to make the save for the Anvil while he's been beat up by DX. And then that's when the battle lines are drawn for Slaughter and Hunter and Sean and Shamrock. I just felt like it was thrown together really quick. So since they're already going back to the well so much with the Survivor Series stuff, why not have this match? I think it's a compelling story. You have the remaining members of the Hart Foundation trying to avenge their family member. I think it really speaks well. And also now we've put together, maybe not in name, but we have the Outlaws and DX kind of together now. Are they going to be DX on Monday Night Raw? Have they just kind of hired the Outlaws as mercenaries? What's next? What's next for Owen? I feel like it kind of closes a chapter, but opens a fresh one as well.
I agree. It definitely opens some things. I don't think it closes a chapter, really. All it does is, like I said, it's going to keep going on with Owen and DX. They're going to keep going back to Montreal. They're going to keep doing everything. You know they are.
That's up to us, though.
We rebook it or yeah, it is. But it's still, I know you. You're a fucking heart mark. You're everything that you can do with the Hearts you want to do. Anything that you can do against DX to a degree you want to do because you're not a DX fan. So you're probably going to keep it going at least through the Rumble and have it in the Rumble match. There will be some beef in there. You're going to probably take it to WrestleMania somewhere. I see where you're going with this. It is what it is, man. Cool.
But
it's another Attitude Era pay-per-view.
Not necessarily for me. I don't think that. Well, first of all, I had DX go over pretty strong here, so I don't think that you can necessarily say that I'm just gonna run down DX all the time because I'm not a fan of them. I have objective booking in that way. And as far as the Hearts go, I mean, I personally in canon, I didn't feel like I needed to see Owen versus Triple H for like time immemorial. It felt like every pay-per-view for the better part of the spring of 98, we would see some version of Owen versus Triple H. And I didn't want to see that either. I was tired of it at that point. Like I feel like what really should have happened was there should have been a definitive blow off. This is part of it. And then maybe do something with Owen and Sean in a singles. And that's it. Like you don't need to go past that. Then once you've done that match, whomever comes out on top, you don't need to then go to Owen versus Triple H. Like, then make a clean cut. The feud's over. Owen goes off and does something else. Sean goes off and does something else. Triple H does something else. I don't need the elongated, half a year of chasing the European title. And at that point as well, by the time we got to the spring of 98, it wasn't even about the screw job anymore. It was just about the personal animosity between Triple H and Owen. And yeah, I mean, they had good matches, but I didn't need to see them constantly.
I honestly think if what you had led off the show with, of having the Bariquas and DOA in the main event, I think that would have been a way better card than what you booked. Not gonna lie.
Okay, sounds good. Well, you're being pretty hard on me this week.
I don't know if it's because it's the holidays and I fucking hate them, or because I just don't like this card. But it's been a while since I've disagreed with you a lot, man. And yeah, this one's is not something I would pay money to watch.
That's totally fine. Totally fine with me. You could have watched maybe something in a bingo hall. Might have been more your style.
It probably would have been, man. I probably would have been down for that, or a high school gym in the Attitude or in the New Generation era would be more your style too.
Yeah, probably so. Anyhow, ladies and gentlemen, as we mentioned earlier on in the show, we'd love for you to hear, or rather love for you to give us your feedback. What do you think about this week's particular booking? What do you think? Is Tyrone on the money? Did I really screw up this week? Did I, make chicken shit out of chicken salad? What do you think? I personally think I did a pretty good job this week in terms of furthering the story along and making some interesting choices going into 1998, creating some opportunities for fresh storylines. Tyrone does not see it that way, and that's completely fine with me. That's the whole point of the show. We don't agree all the time. We don't disagree all the time. But nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed this week's offering of In Your House Degeneration X. And again, please let us know. Send us a comment, whether it's on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, or even on the YouTube page itself.
Can I comment? Is that okay? Can I start leaving comments on there?
Yeah, I would love that. Please do. Please start commenting.
Oh, I will start commenting and leaving thumbs down emojis on everything.
Yeah,
but
that's definitely going to it's definitely going to further our cause.
If you want to be a petty motherfucker like me there and do that, on Facebook, we're the Good Friends, Better Enemies podcast. On Twitter, good_enemies. On Instagram, good_enemies. YouTube, Count It Out 7 page, and countitout7.com for all things Good Friends, Better Enemies, boycotting Ahmed Johnson.
Sounds good. Well, I'm going to return your negative comments and receptions of this pay-per-view. Actually, I'm going to turn the other cheek, and I'm going to give you something nice for next week. I figured it's the holiday season, so why not give you a little gift for your rebooking next week? You ready?
Am I getting to do the Ahmed Johnson story now, or are you actually giving me a gift?
Well, that would be the gift that keeps on giving. But next week, my friend, you are going to be rebooking something that we've never touched on the long lineage of the Good Friends, Better Enemies podcast. Next week, we are going to NXT, and you will be rebooking NXT TakeOver London from 2015.
I wonder if I'll bring Ahmed Johnson back for there and have him win the NXT title in a tuxedo match against fucking Finn Balor or something. That sounds like something you'd watch.
That absolutely sounds like something I'd watch. Let's do that. I can't wait.
I got nothing else to say about it. I'm excited to do NXT. You know that. I love it. And I don't know how much I'm going to change. I got to go back and rewatch that card, but I'm sure there will be a thing or two at least that will be switched up.
Sounds good to me. Well, with that note, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to ride off into the sunset again this week and look forward to being with you again next week for our offering of NXT TakeOver London. And for myself and for Tyrone, for the boys over at the Count It Out 7, Mike and Tyler, for Ahmed Johnson, and for Tuxedo's Matches, you've been listening to the Good Friends, Better Enemies podcast.
Join me next week as I Pearl River Plunge NXT. Bye!